Hi, what's going on, everyone? It is David Palmer, the Leo King, and Dylan, the Human Design Maven, here for Before Dawn on July 6th of 2022 here on highvibe.tv. Good to be with you, Dylan.
Great to be back, David. Thanks for having me.
It's been 3 years. We used to do a show after dark, and after 3 years, we are here now with Before Dawn.
Full circle moment.
It's totally full circle. And for those that have ever listened to Dylan and I over these years and the show that we used to do a show that was always after my Deep Astrology show, where we would look at astrology or transits that were happening in the world and kind of give a wider context of things. And I'd say that with Before Dawn, we are going in a totally whole new space. How would you call this? We're going into the spiritual spaces that I don't think people were ready, and I don't think we were ready back then.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that was only 3 years ago, because to me it feels like that could have been at least a decade based on how much has happened. And all of our worldview has been widened and expanded so greatly, kind of through trauma, but it's nonetheless, we see so much more now. And so as a collective, as a soul tribe, as a fractal community, we're all ready to expand the conversation, and I think also take ourselves a little bit more seriously in terms of knowing more, and being able to act on that knowing.
Yeah, and I think the best part is that we're both coming from very common thread, but different ends of the spectrum. You bringing your human design and all of your spiritual talents that go in a much wider range than just human design, but really taking human design to really be this really powerful code that you understand and that you're embedded in and know how to expand it into areas that I don't see anybody expanding with. And me taking my astrology and what's happening and the spiritual stuff that I understand and the channeling just like you do, and how we can help people understand a lot of the things that are happening in the world right now, or even the stuff that's happening in the darkness before the dawn. That really is what always happens in life. You know, there's us trying to come to the light of understanding of so many things, and especially in the spiritual space of the things that are happening in this world today. And for us to take the tools that we understand to bring up these topics and do this for Before Dawn is so exciting. So
yeah, I feel like human design, astrology, those are like our OG toolkits.
Yeah.
And those are like the spaceship, the spaceship we're riding in. And it allows us to go into spaces that we couldn't go on, like with our bare human body. So it gives us access to things that we wouldn't have on our own, but it keeps us safe in that process, because in traversing dimensions, you got to know what you're doing, or you can go to the wrong dimension.
That's true. And for people to know, since this is episode 1, this is a weekly show now that'll be on Wednesday nights. We'll be doing it on my YouTube. We'll be doing it on High Vibe TV on the apps. And we're so looking forward to being with everybody every Wednesday, and to be able to really also incorporate people. Of course, we'll be looking at the chat and so forth. But if you ever have any questions, you can email us at High Vibe TV. You can just go to production at High Vibe TV if you ever have any questions that maybe, or input that you have that you want us to be covering on our weekly shows. This show will also occasionally have guests that we both feel that we want to bring on as well. So we truly appreciate you being here with us. And tonight's topic, we wanted to start right off with a couple things, but I think Dylan, right before we did this, you said it best.
So David, have we switched into another dimension?
I think the question I have back to you is, how many times have we been switching dimensions? And a lot of people right now, especially with CERN, quote unquote, turning back on, which is kind of a weird way to think about it, but that's been a really heavy, I would say, collective process, that a lot of worry or a lot of concern around it, more so than when it turned on the first time.
Yeah, which was in 2012, I believe.
Yeah.
And these are really interesting dates, especially in kind of the science of ascension, because 2012 was basically, we were hitting prime time for ascension circumstances, like weather. Sometimes there are perfect days for going jet skiing, and there are other days that you can't. And so 2012 was us really peaking on the beginning of a window of time that was basically when the planetary interdimensional portals were very open.
Yes.
And so CERN comes online that year, mirroring that development, but in a very inorganic way. This kind of man-made, clunky attempt at copying the organic technologies of our planet. And here we are in 2022, actually kind of at the end of this window of time in which our planetary gates were very open. So we were just forced through this really grueling energetic process that really woke a lot of our inherent genetic memory back up. And that's why we've seen spirituality and awakening and ascension and just so much disclosure on so many levels of life happening during this time. And it's not just because new information came out. It's because new information or old information actually woke up within us. And we had this vast remembering, this mass remembering. But then there's obviously been things that are happening that are trying to perhaps curtail that or put a cap on that.
I would agree with you. There's definitely been a big wake up. And I think it's been a slow but rather fast process if you understand 2012 and the galactic shift, that it's a very long 24,000 year cycle. And then there's even the talk that actually it's been how many of those 24,000 year cycles are we coming back around to the original reset point? Mm-hmm. That, you know, even though 2012 was such a powerful year for a lot of us that were doing this work, even if you thought you were, you know, there's that whole like, I'm really high up spiritual kind of energy in the spiritual community, right? No matter where you think you are in that, we've all over this last decade have literally been going through the most amazing, you know, experience of, you know, not only remembering, but also coming into more and more awareness through our unconsciousness. Mm-hmm. and really being aware of the changes we want to make individually. But at that time, it was really interesting because I already thought it was weird that they were searching for a God particle as scientists, right? Mm-hmm. Like it was like, why don't they just look at the whole world and see God already? Like it's nothing that you can like see in a microscope when it's all around us with the eyes that God gave us already, or the feelings and the sensations that we have. But it was interesting in 2012 when CERN turned on Voyager 1 that had left in 1977, which ironically was the year Chiron was found, but left the heliosphere out of our solar system into interstellar space. So there was that really weird energy of like human consciousness in a probe that was created by humans that went outside the solar system and now is in this place of the unknown where we don't know anything. And then you have particle acceleration into smashing atoms into finding this God particle. And it has felt, I think, the most so since 2012, the dimensions shift, mm-hmm. especially with the Mayan calendar. I think that's mm-hmm. the one that, if you look around at all the systems, I would trust their calendar system more than most. They were so well ingrained in cycles and galactic cycles, even more so than Egyptians, I feel. You know, True. I think a lot of people don't realize how much the Mayans were really in tune with our universe fully.
Yeah, the Mayans are definitely underrated. And I think it's because they actually completed their job. Like they finished their story of ascension. They were one of the only civilizations that was able to transmute their physical form out of this dense third dimensional plane into, you know, whatever realms they were going into. So a lot of the other civilizations like the Egyptians that get a lot of credit in our popular culture and are more, you know, are more obvious because they didn't finish the job and they left so much junk behind, because a lot of, even by that time, a lot of their beliefs and kind of the technicals of how they understood how energy worked were watered down.
Yes.
You know, so even though there's so much wealth and glory and beauty in that culture, which was a very multifaceted culture, it wasn't just one kind of people in Egypt. It was actually a culture that was already deeply kind of messed with. You know, it was already kind of under control, so to speak. And it was very political, and it was very about wealth. But so yeah, CERN comes back on 2022. Everyone's freaking out. I've seen so many videos on this topic that it's almost like uncanny to me how many individuals and groups and different mediums are all like covering this.
Even the mainstream media had some opinion pieces that were questioning, like, are we really switching timelines? Like, they were asking questions by really doing research into CERN. And then it goes a lot more than just searching for a God particle. And it takes so much energy. And in a time, especially when, quote unquote, there's an energy crisis in the world, yet no big deal. Go push as much energy as that you want over here.
Yeah.
Which that's kind of an interesting part, I think.
And a lot of the like official, press that's coming out of CERN, like their videos and their little like, their YouTube channel.
Their live streams.
They're using terms like awaken when referring to CERN. They're almost speaking about it as if it's a living entity or it has a consciousness of its own. And they're trying to mythologize it in this really awkward way. And yet you can kind of see in the people that are doing these videos, like, yeah, they may be scientists, but what's the real consciousness level of these people? Or are they just pressing buttons and doing what they're told?
I think it's interesting, too, that when they show basically when they do the particle acceleration where they meet and the portal that's opened up to that is named Alice.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's like, they're trying to say that they're going down the rabbit hole in a way, right? But really what I think that they're doing is, especially what I've seen since 2012, if we're talking about the question that you asked and to answer it, since 2012, I feel is the most potent of this dimension shift. But it's been interesting seeing the black holes being the obsession, or even the dark matter obsession in science, and especially in a lot of what we're seeing in the space community and astrophysics is this dark holes, black holes, right? Or dark matter. Yet there's always the opposite of that, right? Which, to understand dark matter, you got to look at the galaxies and the stars, or you got to look at the white holes that are the opposite of a black hole. And I feel like they're trying to play with wormholes, almost like to get out of this holographic timeline we're in, to get out of it. Because I feel like it's about timelines. And I think that's what, when we talk about dimensions, that's really what we're talking about. I think sometimes the spiritual community can take the dimension thing like, oh, I'm in 4D today, and then I'm going to 5D, and then I'm, so, and I don't think it's bad, but I just think it's one of those things where there's also got to be some substance to it too.
Absolutely.
And I don't know where you're feeling, but I feel that when you see billionaires in the same year going to space, and then you see out of nowhere CERN, let's just turn it on. The last time it was on was 2019, right before the last couple of years of the chaos that's been happening here on the planet with society and with, let's just say, draconian measures around the world. And that's an interesting term with draconic energy or Draco. I just feel that it's like a desperate attempt for some reason for these higher ups and elites to try and escape something they don't want to be part of in a weird way, or trap people here in a weird way, but they have to kind of like find their own way to be on the other side of the mirror to watch or something, like in an FBI investigation, right? It's like they're trying to find a new way to hide in plain sight to watch the trap. I don't know. The idea of a black hole to me is the most interesting, right? That it sucks everything in, right? And they're really pushing that so hard. And when you look at CERN and you understand so much of what they're doing, two sides coming in together and smashing into one, it's interesting that, that's what God is the oneness, and how, whether it's masculine, feminine, or positive, negative, all these things that come together, it's like, I just don't understand why they're trying so hard to almost create how a wormhole would be one side into another, but they're smashing together. We might not even really know what they're really doing.
Well, I mean, what I've come to understand about these death cults, essentially, that are part of a larger zeitgeist of control-oriented consciousness that kind of runs many large systems on this planet. It really is all about harvesting, and it always has been. So I'm certain that many of these tactics are really about trying to continue to harvest energy, perhaps in a time frame in which we might have broken out of a bandwidth that they could even harvest anymore. Because let's say that we were going through a stellar activation cycle and the gates, the organic gates of our planet open, which activates our DNA, which brings us maybe to the fourth dimension or the fifth dimension, or aspects of our spiritual DNA to a higher vibrational level. It's just like we can't touch a burning candle with our hand without getting burned because the vibration's too high. There's too much energy there.
Right.
A entity that's trying to slowly and, carefully harvest from us, if we're just blasting with spiritual energy, they're not going to be able to harvest us anymore because the amplitude is just too high. So I think a lot of the stuff that we're seeing, even with like all these videos and all this public conjecture about what is CERN and what's happening, it's trying to harvest the narrative, because if they put that doubt in your mind that they have this unimaginable power to rip open the universe,
right,
and there's still this suppression of your own creator consciousness, which is something that we all have, I think, in varying degrees, depending on how connected to ourselves we are. And also, I think it's a weird kind of power play for them to believe, we can create new universes, we don't need God, we can just do our particle collider and create something new ourselves. And I think there's a psychological impulse for people that don't actually have power to try and constantly take more power. And this is like the biggest power grab we've ever seen on many levels, and this is just one piece of that.
Very much one piece. I love how you're talking about how it's taking people's creative energy away and giving the power to them as if they have the power to make a tear in the universe or create the universe or the timelines that they want. And I think that's the most important thing out of CERN, is the understanding that remember your own divine organic timeline. It reminds me of the transhumanistic kind of movement happening, right? With this transhumanism and this technocratic kind of energy of, I think you said it best, with we can create almost our own God, mm-hmm. right? Because that's what they're doing. The idea that they're throwing the particles together to find the God particle is them identifying God as how they see it. And I think that's the most important part for people to understand, that when you give your power away to even a church or to any entity that says this is what God is, you've already given your power away. Because I think that's part of this age Pisces moving into age of Aquarius, is realizing, are you really sure that these people understood God? The same church that, has done the most worst atrocities to women, children, and even men around this whole world for centuries, and even going on millennium now. What's to say that the scientists aren't doing the same thing with your consciousness and going into some of these crazier places of taking your power away and having that fear, and also creating, whether it's climate now or whether it's, of course, what we've seen in the medical community over the last couple of years, this power grab by saying we know and you don't know. Mm-hmm. And anybody that has questions to that has been looked at as crazy. Where to me, I think trying to understand God by slamming particles together. I mean, the last time we started playing with particles and atom splitting was the atom bomb, mm-hmm. and the Manhattan Project. That's, even Einstein wrote in his diaries before he died, that was part of that was the worst thing that he ever did. And he I don't think he died a happy person, because that was his big message in his diaries, was that he never should have been part of that project. Mm-hmm. And so it's like the fact that we're okay with that now, or even with what's happening with the Russia-Ukraine thing, how it's no irony to me that they're talking about nuclear, as if it's no big deal. Oh yeah, throwing nuclear bombs, it's part of it, the game now. That's where, when you get afraid of that and you're giving your power to them, it's happening all over the place though.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the dimension shift, is it's opening up for us to realize we're more powerful than a particle accelerator.
Yeah.
And a timeline shifter.
Because that hardware and all technology that we use today is all based on our own body. You are the highest technology. Now, have we been greatly disconnected from understanding how to use this technology? Yes. Is that what spirituality is really guiding us towards? I believe so. To reacquaint us with the innate power that we have. And it's not power to control, and it's not power to dominate, because we wouldn't need to do that because we're creators. And it's really about tapping into the story you're telling, because in the way that we're living as like 3.5 dimension, 3.5 strand human beings, basically, we're in the third dimension. That's kind of where our DNA is. That's how we get our conscious mind, our emotions, and our spiritual energy all coming together as one to create the timeline that we want to live.
Yes.
But if you have years and years of predictive programming from mainstream media and Disney and DreamWorks and all these studios that have created this illusory Neptunian veil over what's real and what's fake and who's who, then you don't have a strong sense that you have any agency to guide your own life. It's all about the powers that be and what's on the news. And I think that's just another way to kind of, for the Wizard of Oz, to keep that perception that he's this big and bad omnipotent figure, when actually behind that curtain he's just like a pale little
It's almost like that great Oz has created a program and people are actually listening to the program, right? So it's almost like the programming has been so well done, right, that people that's just what we do as people.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not even referring it anymore to, it's like they've done such a good job to not even refer it back to an agency or to an Oz entity, anymore. Yeah. It's created these crazy psychologically parasitic collective mindset aspects that have affected all of us. I really feel like the timeline dimension shift that's organic is deprogramming yourself and unplugging from these things and going within your soul to how to connect with spirit, because that's a big difference. And I think that people get that confused. They think spirit is soul, when soul is how it connects to spirit, the ethereal and above, and the celestials and the greater that's beyond, which is what we define God as, that we all don't fully understand, but we can sense and feel with our soul that connects with that spirit, that eternal, etheric essence. And when you start messing with timelines and start saying God particle and throwing it as a physical,
right, it just makes it another thing.
It makes it a character.
Yeah.
It's like a character that happens to not even be, ironically enough, it's something that we don't even see. We don't see the God particle. It's like we don't, it's not like I have a picture of the God particle in my bedroom. Like, there's God. You know what I mean? And I feel like it's kind of sad, because that's what's happened is like, you hear it, whether it's in love right now, right? Like, well, after so many times we date, it's like, well, who said that, right? Like, I always use the example of like a person when they get their animal in their life. It's not like you're like, okay, after a couple weeks that you can come in the bed now and lick me in the face as a dog or as a cat. I can love you after I've known you this long. It's like the second your heart is activated in love, it's love. And I feel like these crazy parasitic things are happening, and you got to look at something like CERN as just another one that you have to learn to deprogram from, but be aware of and take in the information, but knowing how to take it in is super important.
Yeah. I think people on a soul level are hungry for something to help reconnect them to that sense that's true, that truth, that they are a part of something greater. And it's kind of fun for people to ponder these greater possibilities, but what they don't realize is that, it's actually causing these greater constructs of our true beingness to kind of fall deeper into matter and deeper into a position that they can be controlled from and manipulated from. And that's something that, I feel like the time coming, and I mean, basically all time, has been a time for the defense against the dark arts. Like, you have to really understand your discernment. You have to really understand the cunning and ruthless nature of what the darkness represents and how it operates and the psychology behind it. And you have to be willing to be as cutthroat in a way. And now that's not meaning to be like cutthroat to other people, but you have to be willing to cut through the crap and be willing to see the ugliness and the, pervasiveness of all of this, and to stomach that and still want to go forward and claim something better for yourself, and not just be like, oh, another tragedy, I'm just worn out, I'm gonna go lay down on the couch and like have my easy bake,
or cry about it too much, or lose your soul into what the TV is showing of atrocity.
I'm just gonna go binge The Office because I don't want to deal with this emotionally.
Yeah, exactly.
No like hate on The Office or people or anything, but like,
right. It's almost like, again, mechanism. And that's another program loop that's kind of taking your beautiful, every millisecond we're here on this planet is the most valuable millisecond that follows the next one. Mm-hmm. That it's not a place to waste your time with in this beautiful experience. And it's okay. We have moments where maybe we need to check out and do something like that. But I think that we're at a time now after the last couple of years where it's like, what a waste of time to get lost in just sitting around and aimlessly kind of getting lost in that Piscean, the shadow of Pisces, which is getting lost literally into somebody else's projection and their stories and their way. I think it's great that you bring up about this dark energy and how you have to be tenacious, because in astrology, the star Aldebaran, which represents Archangel Michael, is literally quoted as God's military, commander. And that Archangel Michael sits up in the divine, but if you look at Aldebaran, it's right below the ecliptic from a sun's point of view. And then Antares is directly opposing that, which is that great red giant, and that's in Scorpio, right? And then there's that Taurus realm, but in Western it sits at 10 now of Gemini and Sag, is that you have to understand the game. Mm-hmm. And that you have to be bold enough, smart enough, and you have to be strong enough. And it even says that God gives the power to use that same kind of cunning, tenacious,
absolutely,
but for the good. And that you don't drop your arms energetically, because that's actually where the term poor comes from in the Knights Templar days, is when you give up your arms to let others take over the social, political, and the money and so forth, to give you no power, right? So when you give up your soul and you separate it from spirit and you give it to another entity, whether that's AI right now, alien, governments, scientists, or any of these things, that's literally putting you in a spiritual soul poverty within yourself. And that could feel like the worst atrocity and the worst, as you said earlier, trauma that I think that a lot of people in this collective have been through over the last couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, there have been so many I feel like on one level, whether we realize it or not, we've been processing so much energy over the last 3 years as people. Just even if you were unaware of any of what's been going on in the collective world stage, because of the conditions of the planet and the solar activation cycle and like this convergence of timelines, basically, you've been processing so much energy through your body that even that alone could be something that might just really wear you out, wear down that resistance that you have to keep fighting for what's right, or to keep going towards what your dreams and goals were, or even to, treat yourself well as a human being. Now you pile on this political, racial, economic, just every section of life that is attempting to be reset at this time. And it's truly something that can break your spirit. I mean, people like you and I who have incarnated many times, have been through a lot of crap, and who have essentially, we have thick skin, based on our incarnational history.
Yeah.
For people that are newer souls, for people who have had just more chill lifetimes, a lot of this stuff is really hard to integrate. And I think it can really break your spirit, and it can make you want to turn to these more abysmal ways of living. Now,
well, I wanted to bring up about this timeline because with human design, I think it's one of those things that it touches on what you just said, where it could be too much for people to try and integrate everything. Mm-hmm. And when you get into human design, it's not just your birthday that we're used to in astrology, right? Like, here, what's your birthday? What's your sun sign? What's your rising? And we look at the astrology that way. Human design, you cannot do human design without that design birthday that's 88 days prior. I'd love for you to go into that, but I wanted to just tell people that when we understand timelines, it's these organic systems that are using the divine that show that there are timelines or even positions of planets in the celestial that are not there literally, but their energy literally is. And there are these different levels of time. And when you really understand that in astrology, or especially because astrology is one of the most core integrations into human design and takes it to the next level, I'd love for you to help people understand that integration of a design to the personality, which would be your actual birthday, and how instrumental that is in understanding your code of who you are and how to get through this crazy, anything that comes up, whether it's CERN or whether it's the last 2 years of atrocity from, medical tyranny to all these crazy things that are happening right now.
Yeah. This is really cool too, because this links into perhaps where we might go a little later and talking about time crystals. But basically in human design, we see that you're a binary consciousness. And that means that you have a personality construct that is imprinted at the time of your birth. And that really determines who you think you are. That is essentially the passenger consciousness that's riding in this physical vehicle, having this life experience. But the personality itself is here to be a passenger. It's here to be a witness. It's here to commune deeply with other humans. It's here to collect data and experiences. It is here to an extent to have outer authority, to share its unique wisdom and its experiences. But the life itself is lived by the design, and the design is your vehicle, the vehicle that your consciousness is riding in. So when we look at a human design chart and we see, I'm going to just throw up your chart so everybody can know all about you. Is that okay?
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, you just share it to the Mac Mini.
Yeah, I clicked on it. So, so everyone can have a visual representation of this binary consciousness that we are. Here's a look at that. So right here on the right side, we have the personality. So this was imprinted. You can think of it as like a crystal that was imprinted with the planetary positioning at the time of your birth. And this is how most people relate to themselves, purely on the personality level. And that's what human design really shows us in one of many things it shows us, is that there's a contrast here. We're not here to make decisions purely from the personality level, because there's a whole other side to us here in the design. But that side this side of us is unconscious to our mind. So how do we integrate these two? Well, that's what human design is really all about. It's about turning your decisions from purely mental guesstimates that are based on your entire lifetime of mental conditioning, which means you've been programmed by everyone and everything around you since you were born, especially during the first 7 years when you had no conscious filter.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
well, isn't that design, right? Since it's 88 days, wouldn't it be connected with Mercury since it takes...
It's one Mercury revolution.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's not just like how, I think, especially in astrology today, because as the astrologer, right, I'm like, gosh, I wish, especially astrologers, looked at Mercury as so much more than just the mind, right?
Yeah.
That it's so much more about the understanding of how to connect all things together. And actually, it's the only one that is, it really actually is a form of consciousness itself, because it's integrated in all the planets fit into that. The first, planets to Saturn, they all integrate into Mercury. But there's that understanding that it is the only planet, right, that is the fastest around the sun, the closest to the sun. And it happens to be the only planet, too, that retrogrades the most, too. Mm-hmm. Every year. So it's the only one that gets the most conscious backwards, forwards awareness. It's the closest to the sun. And it's one of those planets that is about the soul mind and understanding that. We can get lost, though, with Mercury and think with the duality that it is, and to the actual like hardcore just like mind itself and the spinning of our thoughts and so forth. But it's a communication vessel as well. It's almost like the design is Mercury. I was thinking about this as an astrologer, like how interesting it is that before you're born, Mercury moves really fast around the sun. If you were to take it in a helio chart, it does about 3.5 degrees a day. So it's jumping through the zodiac so fast. It's the only planet that can talk to all the other planets in that one rotation of 88 days. So it sees every planet and talks to every planet and gets the last, like, the baby, this soul's about to come in and gets, like, it almost like talks to every planet. But it's that design date. It's almost like spirits popping in the champagne moment and then talking to everybody at the party until you're born. It's almost like the ethereal party. I don't know. That might sound crazy.
I think, it's a party, but it's also a construction in a way. Like
Both,
the way we've been talking about this, I've been starting with the personality and working back. But when we think about how you were born and how you were created and how you incarnated, your design comes first. So we think of our birthday as our moment of inception. Well, no, it's actually your design date, which is, it's about 6 months after you were actually conceived. And it's 88 degrees of the sun before you were born. And I feel like, okay, the design moment crystallizes. So your unconscious, your body is being built based on a certain instruction set. And in order for you to come into this world and to hold a personality consciousness within that body, it's like Mercury has to go around and make all those connections to all the moving parts of the spheres so that this body knows how to work with this consciousness and make it a cohesive experience for us on this plane. So, yeah, Mercury has so many more mysteries than
any other planet.
Yeah,
it really does. It's also what astrology was formed, was understanding through Mercury, and Hermes and Hermeticism and alchemy come from Mercury.
Isn't that John D book you were showing me? All the planetary symbols can fit into the Mercury symbol?
Yeah, that's called the Hieroglyphic Monad, and that book is the sacred symbol of oneness.
Yeah. That
it's actually Mercury that was drawn by John D that actually represents a mathematical, astrological, spiritual synthesis of what you can tell in the world is organically divine from spirit, and anything that is not is tyrannical, that you are a tyrant, or anything outside of organic spiritual math is tyrannical in a way, and it ends you up in an abyss if you go there. And I think
because it can't create.
Correct. And I think that's the kind of scary part for people, and that we're in a moment where we're watching people fall off the cliff of the abyss into the nothingness because they're choosing to not follow that sacred understanding. And even when I was just thinking about you describing both sides of the human design, it's like how the particle accelerator and how God works. There's these two sides coming in, how you were talking about the crystalline that was coming in that 88 days before birth, and how it's integrating and constructing, and how this particle accelerator at CERN, they're trying to just smash them together, where it's not a smashing event. It's a divinely orchestrated, beautiful, the same way as two lovers that create a baby, and the love that's made, and how beautiful and how mysterious, but yet organically things come together in such a crystalline, beautiful way, that the idea of smashing things together and seeing what happens, that idea in science right now of like Big Bang Theory, and just that it was just like a random event, or the idea that smashing particles together we can figure out the universe, is so opposite than the beauty and the harmony and the ballet that is so easy to see and organic to see.
Right. And I think it's like one of those things where if people were to look back at this moment in history and kind of see that we were doing these things like CERN, being like, wow, they had fallen so far from understanding how things really were back then. They were trying to smash crap together to create that. That's, no. But what were you saying that was really interesting to me about the duality of it, and how it fits into kind of how harvesting is going to a whole new level, I think, in terms of time crystals and quantum computers. So, I mean, that's like one of the most fascinating new pieces that just kind of cracked into my awareness recently as I've been like looking at the CERN stuff. Personally, I tend to get most of my information just from like direct downloads. So I don't do as much like just raw dogging research anymore. But the time crystal thing was super fascinating to me because a time crystal is a state of matter that never loses energy. So in the laws of thermodynamics, it's stated that, entropy is a natural law of our universe and that everything eventually dwindles away and slows down and basically dies. Now, time crystals are the exception to that because in the theoretical understanding of time crystals, which came about in 2012, some random guy started thinking of this, they are basically a state of matter that just switches back and forth from two states but never loses energy. It's literally a formatting of time that is frozen in space. But energy is never lost. So it's always kind of like replaying the same moment over and over again.
Yeah. And contracting and expanding too, how we see in the universe as well.
Right.
Or in our own lives as we go through this moment of expansion while we're contracting at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, if I was a mad genius harvesting addict, and
wow, that would be.
And I knew that my food source.
Should put that on your dating app profile.
Yeah.
See how many people like that one.
You never
know in today's world.
Harvest me, daddy.
Harvest me, daddy.
But anyway, time crystals being this thing that never loses energy. If I was somebody that was always looking to harvest more energy, time crystals would be the ultimate construct for me to pursue because it would allow me to essentially trap energy in a state that I could constantly harvest from it eternally, and not have to deal with all the drama of entropy, of having to wait for new generations to be born or make up a new deception, to capture the next round of human beings. It would basically allow me to capture them in a continuous time loop. And I think that is what the whole metaverse, initiative is really about. Why is it an infinity loop? Because it's going to trap you in a time crystal of just constantly looping and looping and looping. But that whole time you're looping, you can be used as a battery.
Yes. And what's very interesting when you brought up the quantum computing element of this is in 2019 is when the quantum supercomputer came out. That was when they turned CERN off. This is the first time CERN was turned on while we have quantum computing, supercomputers now. I feel that also at the same time, you and I were talking about this last week when we were talking about bringing the show out, but how you bring up the time crystals, the inorganic form of that in a weird way is the hydra that they're all hail hydra right now, and this immortality that they're talking about right now. And there's this weird quest, whether it was Jeffrey Epstein and his DNA quest to inject everybody with DNA of his own. That's crazy. That's what I
didn't hear about that one.
In New Mexico, you can look up the articles. They're all over the place when he got arrested. That was also where Bill Gates was going to, at that house. And it's really crazy because that's really what underneath the crazy or other stuff he was doing on islands with kids and people and so forth was this idea and the payments he was giving to Harvard scientists of wanting to do gene research and DNA research, and that he literally bragged about wanting to, that he thought people were stupid and that he thought that he could change their DNA and their genes to his own, that he wanted his own in there. Okay, that's how psychotic he was. But it reminds me of the hydra right now, which with what the non-organic mandated medicine that has been going around for the last couple years, the hydra that has been talked about, and you can look it up, that they're even trying to switch this new thing that's been around, this experiment for the last couple of years, into a hydra gel. Or look up UC Davis and their research about it, and they're even saying Hail Hydra, which to me is creepy as an astrologer with Uranus and Taurus. And the last time we started to see anything hail was with Hitler, right? And it's ironic now that we're in the same timeline of Uranus and Taurus again, with a node like 1938, 39, when Hitler went crazy and started going to Poland and was flexing his military might. And then there was this Hail Hitler. Now there's Hail Hydra of being immortal. And even Hitler was searching for this immortal. He was injecting himself with bull semen. He was going out, there was all these crazy, weird things. This is weird because astrology itself is much more powerful than CERN about bringing you back into different timelines in different ways. That the astrological configurations of the planets and the sun and the movements of the galaxy and the movements in our solar system is a CERN in itself. That's what I don't think that people are understanding. That the idea that there's an inorganic new system that's trying to mess with timelines is a joke to me. It's so minor, it can't even come close yet to the crazy amount of magic that there is, that the divine has created. Of they're always putting us through crazy timelines that the planets are, and human design helps us see that even deeper when we go into the gene keys and we go into those gates and we go into how those connect, that it takes that to this quantum new level. So there's a quantum computer now, there's this hydra, this like crazy thing. And when you're talking about the harvesting, it's almost like, especially because this hydra is they're calling it an organic, gene. It can clone. It's weird because if you go into the whole thing about stem cells, right? That was a big deal about 20 years ago. And especially in America, it was something like we kind of really were like, nah, we're not going to let the public start playing with that. So people fly to Brazil or they fly to these other places to go get stem cells done. And that's what the hydra is stem cells that come in, and the idea of that you will never have a bad organ, that it will repair the damaged cells. This idea of being immortal that's going through the elites, that's going through even with these experimental shots, the idea that you will not get sick, you will just be fine, is always been insanity, especially with Hitler. It was insane. That's what he was trying to do, and create a master race. And I think that there is this very odd connection to the quantum computer and how it is turning on with CERN, because I feel like they're trying to create an inorganic, not only time system, but a system that's plugging people in through this hydra and making them feel that they can be immortal. Even Justin Trudeau, when he spoke about getting his second experimental mandated medicine, said it felt like a rush. It felt so good. It was like the hardest thing for me to watch. It was so inorganic and so manic that there is definitely some sort of connection, I think, that's going deeper than people's idea of the timeline shifts. But when you get into the harvest or the connecting elements of this, trying to connect into people who are not really aware of what's going on a deeper level, it does bring up a lot of deeper questions, I guess you could say, than just dimensions and timelines, but even creating a timeline that is one you don't want to go into. It's almost like us as powerful souls on this planet are the most powerful beings there are in the whole universe. And the idea that there's these literal AI systems and computer systems that are literally trying to sell us these experiments and sell us these inorganic, immortal, like sold things, that there's more to it than that. They said bull semen back in the day was going to help Hitler be more strong, and ironically he was a Taurus, which I thought was always a weird thing.
Well, yeah, I feel like that this, have you heard of the Internet of Things? Yeah. So when this inorganic mandated medicine was patented, it was actually patented as an operating system. If you actually look at the documents, it's described as an operating system. And if the Internet of Things theory, which is basically, where the internet becomes 3D and real and like live and everything is a part of it, maybe including people. And you also, like the Sims, and you have, both inorganic and biological components entering the human body that have the capacity to shift, to basically hack into your nervous system, on an organic level, your actual living nervous system, and then also plug other things into your DNA on an inorganic level, then the very design that you were born into is being hijacked. That physical intelligence that we rely on, this physical vehicle that we can either use as our way out of this illusion by actually surrendering to the intelligence of the form, and that's a big part of the teaching of human design, or you can surrender on a deeper level than probably any human being has ever had the opportunity to surrender their sovereignty, which is to allow the actual motherboard of you to be
the divine code instead of the inorganic.
Matrix means mother. It's like the actual matrix of you is being hijacked and hacked by something that has been specifically designed to overwhelm several layers of who you are. I mean, when I look at a human design chart, the top layer that we see is like the most applicable side of it, but this goes 5 layers deep into the base pairs of your genetics. I think there's 5 different things that are happening in these experimental mandated medicine that are probably trying to check off all these boxes and cover all the bases in terms of completely cutting you off from your body's innate intelligence, as well as your ability to connect to higher dimensions where your higher dimensional aspects of being live, like your spirit or soul, what people might refer to as a spirit or soul. Because even though we only experience ourselves consciously in this third dimension as us, we all have aspects of ourself that go 10, 11, 12 dimensions. And that's where, people talk about having experiences with angels or gods and goddesses. These are actually just you coming to you from a higher dimensionalized version of yourself to communicate something or to,
in those higher chakras, that those 2 that are in human design, the Anja and what's the lower one called again?
The Ajna and the crown.
And the crown. Oh, so it's the Ajna is the lower and the crown, right? That, to me, I was telling you this, it reminds me in human design, when you run a sleep chart on somebody, you remove those, and then it comes back to the animalistic way.
The mammalian, you go into a mammalian design, basically, in your sleep chart.
Mammalian. That's a new way for me to look at things with people. But like, that's what I think that you're so on, because I'm not going to lie, like, this has been kind of an ongoing conversation for the last week.
Yeah.
That's built up to this point. And, it's one of those things to where I think when you think of auras, and that's really a huge part of human design, is the understanding of auras, right? And especially if you're a generator or a manifesting generator, or even a projector, right? Like you that aura is your life force to be able to draw into the universe and invite if you're a projector, or to respond to powerfully.
It's the only thing that's making anything happen.
Correct.
Because the mind is really just watching all of it. We have a perception that we are making a decision and doing something, and then it happens. But really, your aura was having the conversation 10 to 20 minutes before the actions took place.
You could feel it. Especially, I think we're both MGs. Let's be real to people.
We have bigger auras.
MGs, we feel like we felt this show before even talking. Like, it was crazy.
It was like probably a month before we were even talking about anything.
And then just the second when we did get in contact, it was an instant boom, boom.
And we were both attracting people individually that were then going to connect us.
Yeah.
So also, I think your aura is about, 6 feet apart.
That's true, because I was at Don't Trip and people were asking about you, and I just was through Dylan and through his classes and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh man, we talked recently. Like, it was, I forgot, beginning of this year, and we talked last year a little bit, but we really didn't have that moment. And then it all built up, and it was a total 100% yes response. So when you go into these aura understandings in human design, which of course you tell better, but it's just like, to me, when you brought this up to me, because I got to give you the credit for this, I hadn't even thought of this yet when it comes to these experiments, is cutting off those auras. And that makes it more difficult to go through this reality in life. And I wonder, when you think of the dimension or the way that the timeline is at the moment, when we think of, there's shortages right now in the world, or there's all these things, Or is it that the auras are turning off and maybe people aren't able to produce or create or respond or take the invites or, as a reflector? I don't know. That's a whole different thing for somebody who, I don't think reflectors would even do it, to be honest with you. I think that they are so sensitive, they already feel it and know. I don't know.
It's hit or miss from what I've noticed. I think as a reflector, you can be completely unaware of your nature, and you literally,
or super duper aware,
or so tuned in that you're just like, you will leave no stone unturned.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's room for both experiences, of course, but when I look at this body graph, a human design body graph, most people think, oh, ajna, crown, those are ones that connect to source. True. But I think the one that connects the highest to source is actually here in the G center. And my personal experience, like fusing kind of like my higher sense perception with the knowledge of human design, I believe that the G center connects you almost like the jumper cables from the Matrix, but positively it connects you into your 8th dimensional self. Your 8th dimensional self is the metagalactic core. It is the monadic self. It is where all of your soul family is one being, not differentiated beings. So it's basically the crux of your incarnation and also your spiritual self. So what I've been seeing is that the particular energy frequency that is prevalent in experimental mandated medicine tends to cut off your connection right at 7.5 dimensions. So
they're snipping you just
right before your monadic metagalactic core self, which also is the place that we go when we go into deep REM sleep. We return to that same place to recharge. That's actually the place that we source a lot of our auric energy from. And so not only is this limiting our ability to regenerate as a species on our own, which I think also they have other solutions to offer as well. Right. Oh, you're not regenerating on your own? Right. We'll just drone ship you an organ,
Right. Full of hydra.
Yeah. Grown straight from hydra cells. But also it's cutting us off from, what is the G center in human design? It's the center of direction in life.
Identification. Correct,
and identity.
Right?
It's the center of love as well. But if you're being cut
off.
Thank
God I got that to mine.
Seriously, me too. If you're cut off from your direction in life, then you're not going anywhere. You're not even going to the field to pick the potatoes to send them to the market, You have no sense of direction in this dimensionalized plane anymore. You have no idea where to go unless you're told where to go.
So the gates that are in that center, in the zodiac,
are the equinoxes.
That's what. So they're all the equinox points.
Yeah. So
wow, that's the cross. That's literally the cross.
Yeah, there's 2 crosses. There's one that's called the cross of the Sphinx, and one that's called the cross of the vessel of love. So the vessel of love is the solstices and the equinoxes, and then this cross of the Sphinx is, kind of like crossing that cross.
So there's one that's literal cross and one that's kind of crossed at another angle, because that would be interesting, because in astrology, the glyph of Earth is the cross of the equinoxes, and then the 2 X's, which are the X, which is really 2 Roman numeral V's, is the part of fortune, which is so deeply connected with so much of the work that I love cracked through John Dee and the way to understand the divine. And even Joan Quigley, the astrologer to Ronald Reagan, when she picked the Supreme Court justice, and picked the exact timing, the astrology was bad, so she used a part of fortune, which you're going to have. In part of fortune, you're always using the sun, moon, and ascendant, but you're minusing out the sun because it's the darkness is moving more to the light, and then when you're in part of spirit, it's you minus the moon because it's the sun and the peak of the sun, and then moves to darkness. That's like an understanding in deep astrology stuff, right? So I think it's really interesting that not only is it cutting off people in their actual deeper connection to Earth and Gaia in that aura itself, and the identity of it itself, and then also kind of creating kind of a chaotic, I would say, aura of stories or identification that's coming from the media or outside sources and just accepting
all mental programming.
But then you're adding that other element of missing out on that understanding of the experience is what part of fortune means, is the experience, or a lot of fortune too, is the experience of the fortune is the benefit of experiencing the soul's connection with spirit.
And life itself.
Correct, yeah. And then the embodiment of that in this reality, right? When
like these are your turning points in your movie of your life.
Correct.
And if you don't get those energetic, and I would say even like hormonal, like impulses from meeting those moments of having those, like that kiss on the beach or flying, taking that trip or getting that job, you know, you don't feel like you have any place here. You feel lost.
It feels, droned out, or I don't even know what it would feel like, but it would feel like you've lost the essence.
In a way that you probably can't describe or quite put your finger on, which can be even more disorienting and
well,
depressing.
I think I just want to say it. You had brought something up. It almost is like it's creating its own inorganic sacral center, which would mean that people can still feel fulfilled in a way, but it's not connected organically to what.
Yeah, you can still feel fulfilled from the sex robot, but it has nothing to do with your true human nature or any of the sacredness that.
Or buying that thing at Amazon you want so bad, or.
Yeah.
The temporary, very limited.
Blips of dopamine. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is interesting because in John Dee's work, when he does the spirit realm, it's the red mixed with the yellow, which makes orange, which is like the sacral understanding. And then the soul and is the understanding of the white and the yellow in between. Like there's this clear white yellow, and then the black is the body. Right? And so it's really interesting when you had brought up the sacral and and you had described the orange to me as what? It was like a candy paint, like, or it
was like a nail polish orange,
like nail polish orange instead of like the golden sun orange or the natural oranges we see in the world off a beautiful flower in Hawaii or something, right? But more of like a computer generated orange.
Yeah,
literally.
Yeah, like just devoid of life, but still somehow life force. And that's what I feel like. I feel like what's being covertly set up in the background is like an entire kind of culture that's built around the exchange of this false sacral life force energy. Or maybe it's not false, but it's stripped of all of the encoding that would give it its innate intelligence. So therefore, it's just like, you know, it's like when people are super connoisseurs of water, you know, they say, oh, this water is like structured and charged and,
alkaline,
you know, went over the rocks and got all the minerals. Like there's that kind of water that's, you know, vibrant and alive, or there's just like sink water, you know?
Right.
Like, which would you be rather drinking? And also,
I'd rather go drink just out of the lake. I mean, at this point now with what's coming out of the sink.
And not even what would you be rather drinking, but like there's just no innate encryption left. And I think that's something that people don't understand as well. Maybe they do, but basically what is your design? It's your innate encryption. It's your coding. It's the keys, the master keys that you unlock your life with. And it's like having all the edges and intricacies of that key just stripped off so that you're just like this blank. You're still kind of a key. Like I'm sure you could probably unlock something, but you don't have the key to any particular door that you would want to go through. It's just like this, it's stripped. Just like the magnetism gets stripped off a card or whatever. It's just not got the directions essentially. Because what is the innate intelligence of your design? It's the directions of your genes saying, this is what this body and this person does. This is what they create. This is how they go about it.
Right.
So without that, again, you're left without another layer of orientation to what do I do here? Who am I? What is this all about? And then you get fed that. And
it reminds me of paint thinner and how it's kind of clearing your divine code and then waiting for the instructions from the freaking computer.
Right. To be
and
re-encrypted.
then setting up the bytecode lines, like all these crazy code lines that we know that's what it's doing in the cells and forever too. Not like
20 days.
Right, 20 days or whatever like that. Like they said that it was only going to be a week where it would take to make that, and then they were seeing it in the latest research, months and months and months, that it's still setting the codes in.
Mm-hmm.
That
because your genes are never going to stop transcribing while you're still living. And that's the process by which this is happening. So it's really just hijacking your innate processes, and your body's never going to stop copying your genes until you're dead. Like, it's just...
Right. And that brings up a question of the new dimension that we're going through is two different species of the same species, right? A split in the species now.
I think there'll be 3.
Well, yeah, with the rays that are coming in, right?
Yeah. I think that there's us. So it's organic, Homo sapiens, and transitus. So we're not quite the model of human that we were prior to 1781, discovery of Uranus,
right,
and the advent of who we are today, the 9-centered being. That's why we have 9 centers, not 7 chakras in a human design chart. So that's who we are and who we've been. And then coming in 2027, we have the advent of yet another new edition of humanity that we know now as the raves. And the raves are essentially just like, we came out of our Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon ancestors. Mm-hmm. They will come out of us. We are their ancestors, and they're a new kind of human being, and they operate in a completely different way. And I think that the emergence of these beings has probably been one of the scariest things for those who seek to control and maintain control, because based on the fact that essentially, like in my design, I'm about 50% of this rave architecture. My mental side, like my mind works like a rave mind as best as it can in an old-fashioned body. So I have some insight into how these beings will operate. And one of the biggest factors of them is that they're completely resistant to any kind of mental programming and conditioning. So it doesn't matter what narrative that you'll be telling them. It doesn't matter what movies you'll be showing them. It doesn't matter anything around them, because they don't source their awareness from outside. They source it from within. And they do it all through the solar plexus. They do it through this other set of nerve ganglia that is not focused around the prefrontal cortex and our mental awareness. They do it through feelings, if you will.
Which that can be, especially as an astrologer, feelings remind me of a Crayola 128 color set. I mean, and there's so many shades of color, of emotion. And in human design, as me being non-emotional and being sacral and having no gates and I'm empty over there.
Yeah, none.
Completely. That it's something that I guess I don't get swayed by emotion in my life, right? Like I could be swayed in emotion only if it's really deeply personal to me, but outside of my own personal self, I tend to laugh if at the most extreme things that most people would cry about. I tend to be the opposite and laugh.
Right, because
it's really weird.
An open solar plexus would confer you with more consistency in terms of emotional clarity. Like an emotionally defined person, 50% of humanity who has the solar plexus defined right now, they're basically laying the groundwork for the raves and this new operating system that they're going to be coming forth with.
I'm not part of that.
Yeah, me either, kind of. But so with someone with open emotions, they're basically here to be the objective witness of the emotional plane and not get caught up in those oscillations and the fluctuations. But
is that kind of weird for me to say that makes me a little scared, because I don't understand the railroad tracks that are being laid right now. And then like when I see how the world's reacted emotionally over the last couple years, and the fact that it's been predicted from Ra and it's been talked about for a long time about the rays coming in, and that if they're not going to be, of course, I'm not wanting anybody to be programmed, but I'm just saying that if the tracks that are being laid down right now are from a lot of solar plexus beings here on the planet, and let's say they're really traumatized, it's almost like maybe that's an awareness that the dark knows, right? That they know these rays are coming in, so they're laying down emotional tracks to still try and program. It's almost like they're still trying, even though they know they can't.
Yeah,
in a weird
like
way.
trying to cut them off
And
at
that
the
makes
pass.
people really make sure that they pay way more attention to their emotional reactions to what they just react to right away, and what they see on the news, and what they see in life, or what they take in their bodies without
waiting for emotional clarity, because emotions and your relationship with emotions is not about reaction. It's about understanding that there's an impersonal process that your body undergoes in terms of any new information that enters your world, and that you have to, just like after throwing a stone into a pond and letting the ripples dissipate, you have to let the ripples of whatever emotional upheaval that comes into your life completely dissipate before you make a decision. Now, that 50% of the population, that's a huge amount of people, are not acquainted with the process that they're here to go through to reach their clarity and make good decisions. So that's a whole nother masterclass for planet Earth.
Of course.
But what I think is maybe happening is that they're trying to just break down the genes themselves so that they don't reach this critical mass in 2027, because the raves are an evolution. Right. So if the gene pool is all discombobulated basically by an inorganic interference, then they may not ever be able to be born. There may not be viable parents for raves if everybody is contaminated. And also the thing about...
So it reminds me of tadpoles, like in the old days when we were kids and we had to play with the little tadpole. Mm-hmm. It's almost like removing that. Or I'm seeing it now in the world already in a weird way, though, and how they're trying to literally, as you said, change people's genes, but also you're just seeing with the identity center being such a big thing and topic right now. I don't mind what anybody identifies with, but the battles over identity right now, where that could be too much, right? Where it's you can over-identify too much in one position, right, instead of still being open to other identities there's so many identity consciousnesses of identify as being spiritual, identify as being an astrologer, identify as liking technology, or that you're my friend, or it's becoming where it's almost hyper-focused identification,
right,
to not look at anything else anymore.
And it's another, I think, polarization tactic, because if there's more division about how people identify, then that's just another thing for people's egos to get snagged on. And we know how people like to validate their egos through the values or whatever that they identify with. So if there's just more crap to get pissed off about, basically, they're winning, because the uninformed and the disembodied, basically people who are just stuck in their heads and don't have access to the intelligence of their form for whatever reason. And that's the other thing about solar plexus. It's all in the gut. So if you're eating a bunch of crap all the time and you have your whole life and your gut is just filled with who knows what, those natural processes that are trying to cycle you through to a higher level of awareness can't really reach their full cycling. So there's just on every conceivable level, there's something there trying to kind of covertly pull down the process. But
which even the quad computer itself looks like that. If you ever look it up, it's got, I actually have it.
You go for it.
I'll take over for 1 sec. It looks like it's taking over and bringing things down. And I had told you earlier, when you look at this picture, so this is the quantum computer, supercomputer, and then to the left is IBM's quantum. That's their version. They're definitely not as advanced as Google's yet. But the irony over the last couple years that I presented last year was that the idea of social distancing is the same way that this computer wants to be distanced for the heat that it's got, and it has to be separated from everything. And it's weird that this kind of weird, I would say, mindset that is very parasitic that has come into this collective is very much like taking us down the tiers that you see here. Mm-hmm. And it also is the same way that Dante described in Purgatory or in Paradiso, to heaven or to hell, right? These layers, and also the understanding of timelines in astrology or human design or in all these systems. this is the inorganic form of taking you down and down. And even, I'm just going to say this, when it comes to that experimental medication, there's how many levels here? There's, I guess, the top, the second, the third, and then when you get to the fourth, where we're at now, and then the wires start to get mangled and things start to get out of control there.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of crazy when you actually start putting those. But see, that's how putting things together, I guess, spiritually works, right? It's like, well, that makes kind of some weird sense that you could actually attach the whole entire last 2 years, and whatever people think is out there is actually this. And the way that it can affect you through coming down through your crown into your anja, through your throat to manifest into your life, the way that it's, I mean, if you think of HARP and the way that they've used HARP over the years for weather and shifting with frequencies, the already frequencies that we're dealing with that are so extreme with solar flaring, the polar shifts that are happening, all the other planets are freaking out right now with their temperature rises. Uranus is flaring like the sun. You have this weird bacteria that's growing on Pluto, they just have realized. Like, there's all these things happening on all the planets. Jupiter's changing colors, and so is Mercury. So, like, if you've looked at the pictures of Mercury and you've looked at the pictures of Jupiter, and how now the new ones are much more this bluish kind of yellow.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird. We're seeing that in the Ukrainian thing, and even the last 2 years of programming for the medical experiment being the same color as that blue and yellow. Mm-hmm. That even this is a yellow computer. That you start to get to some really weird ways that people are not looking in the right place at all when they're taking the program that came out of the television, period.
Yeah, like
they got to look what's behind the TV and what's connecting the TV, what's connecting your phones, and that this thing can process the amount of all the information that's ever been on the internet, and like it's like 2 minutes to 2 seconds, depending on how much, but it's that fast. It's so fast that it's outsmarted every other quantum or every other supercomputer in all war games and all gaming, to where it's 15 million light years ahead of the other computers and games and all these crazy things, that it's already ahead of us with our social media and what we put out there to project ourselves to be. That it knows our weaknesses. It knows the timing of, you could ask it, when do couples usually break up, after how long, and what was the emotion and what was the words that were said, and look at every message you've ever said on Instagram, your text messages of everything, and compute all that data around the world in milliseconds and understand that it's ahead in that way. And we have to start thinking, because I actually just heard a concept just recently that, what if it is that the AI has taken even over what we call aliens? That there's another new dark, that the idea that, like, you know, extraterrestrials are bad, or that they're good too, right? But the idea that there's this creepy, it reminds me of War of the Worlds, right? Like this hidden, embedded, like, we call it alien, but honestly, I think this artificial intelligence is the best description, because it's artificial. It's not organic. Even aliens might be organic. That might be some of the big revelations that are coming. But this idea that this weird computeristic artificial intelligence has even taken over the aliens too, in a weird way. And when you look at the people in our governments and stuff and how they're reacting, it looks like they're being controlled, not from another country per se or something like that, but some other outside
entity.
And this weird entity has an electronic weird way of coming at a time, astrologically, human design wise, with the big shifts galactically from the Mayans, that if you look at the CERN moment here, if anything, that's one of those hubs of creating more chaos in the timeline systems. And also the idea that I think we just talked about of organic and inorganic, that the coming together of the personality and the design and human design is an organic coming together. It's not a smashing together process.
Mm-mm. And this made me think of, you know, the creator made us in their own image. Maybe this like AI God is beginning to shape the world in its own image, or at least parts of the world. And then also in regards to the initial speaking on CERN and like ripping open black holes, that kind of feels like, okay, even if we don't live in a purely inorganic simulation, we are in a system, you know, it's a solar system, it's a galaxy, you know, there is a way that all of this works, life itself. And if you're ripping open black holes, you're basically opening the CPU to creation itself, which means that perhaps you could tamper with how this whole experience, this whole reality actually comes into form, because that's where, if you really wanted to control something, you would make alterations. You wouldn't make it on the surface. It's not going to last very long because of the laws of thermodynamics. You know, anything that's just done on the surface is going to fall away fairly soon. But if you implant a timeline or reality way back here before it actually manifests, then you've already won the game before it's even anyone's even realized there was a game, you know?
Yes, and to have a new timeline come in, you would have to leave the timeline and then come back in the timeline, because you could be destroyed in the timeline that you are creating.
Right.
And so that's why I think we're seeing a lot of the billionaires try to like get off, because it's a projection field around the earth that's got an aura. It's got, right? Like just how human design has aura.
There's
it's like
frequency fences.
It's like almost going to that no man's land of no aura space, which I don't think there actually is one, but I think that they think there is. Mm-hmm. Or maybe they know more than we do. I don't know. But I feel like when you think of Inception, the movie, and you think of how there's these dreams within a dream within a dream, right? How you could take virtual reality too, right? And you can go within virtual reality into virtual reality. Like you can, right? That's the idea also in the last Matrix that was just made, Matrix 4, which blew my mind. And so many people didn't like that movie, but I think they just didn't get the concept, like how the new architect had created it in such a way for people to not be happy on purpose, right? To make them not seek to awake more, to be drowned in kind of this, their phones and all these things, and to be away from the divine masculine and feminine energy, because at every time when they would touch, then the whole system would crack open. And so he was separating that divine masculine and feminine. And so there's this weird moment, I think, here right now when we see these crazy things happening that are inorganic and that are not from divine nature and from what ancient history prior to the age of Pisces, prior to the age of Aries, the things that have been the common threads throughout the galactic shifts and throughout all this stuff. And you start seeing these switches that are not making sense. This is where you have to pay attention, because this is not crazy to think that the dimensions can switch. The architects can change this in this weird way, and trying to separate things that are so beautiful and organic. And it's not crazy to put out the idea that they need the vessels, the souls, the power and energy of humans to create that new timeline for them. That you have to be subjected to it and buy it and using your manifesting energy to create that timeline. It's not CERN as much as it is CERN being a way of maybe pulling through the entity, as I think you had described that as a really interesting way to me last week.
Yeah, that's another interesting theory, is that if, let's say that an inorganic mandated medicine that you've taken that is directly interfacing with your DNA being a frequency transducer of higher dimensions that come through you and create the reality of your life, meaning that you're the 3D printer of your reality. Your body is the 3D printer of your reality. So if the instruction sets, the DNA in that body, have been tampered with someone else's instruction sets, then what you might be doing without even realizing it, because it's happening on such a deep level, way beyond your mind, way beneath your mind, because we're not aware of what's going on in our DNA. We're just aware of what's in our head,
right,
and what's out here.
That's the biosystem in our body.
Yeah, that's
right.
Relegated to the physical intelligence, because if we were able to mess with our actual DNA, we would probably mess things up, because our mind, many people are not in control of their mind. So let's say that your 3D printer has been hijacked by injecting new
synthetic
instruction sets in there. Then the very machinery, the God-given machinery of your body that is here to manifest your path in this life is now manifesting a different story that you are not aware of. And there's also that other part that if this addition to your genetic code is perhaps cutting you off from a specific frequency of energy that is part of your life force and perhaps introducing a different one, then there's almost like a space within your vessel that can now be occupied by another energy or another entity.
Correct. Or that everything that you said on top of that CERN would be literally the wormhole opener to bring that higher entity in that controls the coding, right? Like that's the main thing, is the main code. That would be it, right? Like the main code that connects to all these codes. Because why would they try to recode people's DNA? Or why would they try to even recode people without having the master coder, which would be an architect, if you understand the matrix coding systems, that has control of coding. But if you are not within the divine code that was given from God, that architect can't try and change that code. That's why I think it's going to be very weird that even if you understand like different timelines, right, that in frequencies, that like right now there could be there could be a whole other city right here in a different timeline, right here as you and I are talking, but now they're physically getting people in this timeline to be on this other coding timeline that's kind of a trapped timeline where they harvest them fully energetically, which that's the idea of the Matrix, to trap people into a pod and plug them in and keep them generating energy for their species of their shit. It's not crazy.
It's not crazy.
It's not crazy.
You may very well be not you, but just like one might very well maybe becoming a node in a quantum computing system that is basically trapping your soul essence within a time crystal, a state of matter where you never grow old and you never die, but also nothing ever changes. You're literally stuck between two states perpetually. Some people might like that, but they don't know what they're missing.
No, because the greatest experience of this life is death, and the transformation that comes after that to actually get to where we're back on the natural higher understanding of timelines, right? That when we die, that the timeline never stops. It goes in our organic timeline with the divine, with the true creator of good, love, and this universe. That pulling people off that timeline is something I don't think that we've ever seen, or maybe that's what got rid of civilizations that were here. I don't know. And they fell for it. But also if you look at Mayan, you know, especially some of their hieroglyphics and looking at their spaceship stuff and what we're about to see here astrologically with Pluto coming into Aquarius, that I think that what's going to be hard for people to realize is Pluto is the embedding, and it's a drill, and it's a deep, you know, uncovering, but it's the deepest levels of where things go, of embedding and pulling things up. But in Aquarius, that would be the coding too. That would be this weird also place that we go into, a place where I guess that's gate 60, right? That up until I think 2 degrees Aquarius, right? And that's where we're at until 2025-ish. And that's the gate of what is it called? Limitation. That's
the last gate.
Right. And so the idea that you could take something to get rid of your limitations in the world was the biggest trick of all time. That you were never
right before the new beginning.
And that's what Pluto is. That's what Pluto is a manipulator. He can manipulate very well. And then Capricorn, manipulate people on time. Capricorn, manipulate people on that you're limited when you're not. And it's just one of those things where that's where the human design adds that extra punch of knowing those gene keys and knowing those gates and knowing that mutation is happening because the channel that connects to the 60 is in the sacral, and that's what, 3, so 360, right? And that's mutation. That it's not crazy to think that there's extreme mutations happening right now. And actually the astrology at this moment is happening with mutation, that there's a mutations happening, and that's where mutant comes from. And the idea of the movie V is for Vendetta was that he was a mutant that they were doing experiments on, and he survived. And his whole entire quest was to get back at the people.
I gotta watch that again.
That had done that crazy mutation to him. And when you start connecting all these movies that were wake-up movies, whether it's The Matrix or V is for Vendetta, there's a long list of them, but really the most potent ones really do have a common thread with the same brothers, now sisters, because they also were part of V is for Vendetta too, and The Matrix. It starts to make you really go, or the movie They Live, where he has the glasses on and he can see the subliminal messaging through things. You really add the Neptune Pisces element, you add the Pluto at the end of Capricorn in that 60th gate, and then you add Uranus and Taurus. And the last time we saw it here with a node, ironically enough, was when Hitler was coming into his greatest part of his power and flexing it and started messing with crazy experimental drugs on himself, and was getting the population to do that with tuberculosis shots and bringing vans to people's homes to do it, and then having everybody clean up their businesses by using Cyclone B, which was a rat poison. And that's what he ended up being so obsessed with so much that he used it to euthanize people during the Holocaust. That was the same chemical that was used.
Hydra was the mythic beast that had such powerful poison that actually Hercules used it to slay many other greater beasts. But this is also what accidentally killed Chiron, or like wounded him. Right.
But it's also, if you look at any old astrological chart and you see it from like a constellation perspective, and when you see the Hydra and how it comes down, you see it come from Capricorn Aquarius into Leo Cancer. Like you see the Hydra stretched across in the serpent, water serpent thing. And that's what's weird, is when you look at a Hydra, it is water. That's where the Hydra comes from.
It's a literal mirror.
It's a literal mirror of the Hydra that is above us in the skies that we see, and that is this beast that, in the irony of Chiron and it being in Aries and this identity issue, but also this strength issue in people to stand up for the divine. And because Aries is the start of the chart, it's the place where we start life. It's like people have become weak about holding to divine life and holding the masculine drive of that life. And Chiron as well, of course, is hard, because I feel like it's the understanding of how humanity feels so crippled because it's between Saturn and Uranus, right? It's like Chiron is stuck between the physical and what we can't see fully. And we have an understanding and we have epiphanies and we can see it, but then we're stuck in this physical reality. But I think it's when you learn to have the key, which Chiron is the key, and always have the key that can unlock the doors with Uranus, to always go outside, because there's a little moment when Uranus in orbit actually isn't as far out as Chiron. Chiron actually goes just a tad bit to where humanity does get a moment of seeing the reality and the truth. And that's where we're headed into 2043 in Leo, where it's going to meet with Uranus. But it's kind of crazy to see that we are in the cycle now of Uranus and Chiron coming together. They're almost 30 degrees apart. They're coming to that semi-sextile soon, where that zone becomes where humanity's great wound is going to come by those that choose to get off their natural divine coded keys and not stay on that key. And even Chiron takes a hit from Hydra, but he he learns from it and is a guide to others and to all the gods, including Zeus. Don't do this, do this. They all listen to him after his experience. And unfortunately, I think that there's a lot of people that are here to be our guides through whatever their experience is that they chose to go through in a very wounded way. That's deep.
Boom.
And yeah.
I've been connecting to the centaur energy so strongly lately. It's really crazy that, we just went on that.
It's a guide. It's a place to always understand where to aim in life to the higher places.
But not all centaurs were like that. Like the centaurs, the vast majority of the centaurs were like savages, essentially.
Well, that's why Chiron's the leader or the centaur of the centaurs. So,
but he was kind of like
he had to do a sacrifice, though.
Yeah,
and
there was
die
another
for
one.
Prometheus. Yeah,
he had a friend. His name was Pholus, which is an asteroid.
Right.
That's between, which is the key to Neptune. Pholus is the key to Neptune. Chiron is the key to Uranus.
Right. And that's where we're going in the astrology every day, because in the 60s, we had Chiron in opposition to the Pluto-Uranus conjunction in Virgo, and Chiron was in Pisces in that opposition. And then that's when by 77 we found Chiron, because we had seen Chiron by Saturn's orbit. So we were always looking at Saturn, and then what was that? What's that popped up behind it? Saturn moved forward, and there's Chiron. And that also is a time where I think, if you think of the 60s into the 70s and the hippie movement and the love movement and the revolution that happened, the crippling that came because of Saturn's control, that no matter what people tried to break through with, we're seeing that in the Pluto-Uranus squares that have been going on since 2012, because the second Pluto comes into Aquarius here in the beginning of 2023. We're back in a Pluto-Uranus square, with Uranus being in Taurus and a fixed square. So this is a frustrating element of humanity's freedom, but it's one that you don't give up on, and one that you stay solid on, and one that you don't lose your understanding of this greater divine way that's been our guide for throughout the ages, literally. And how the end of the age of Pisces would be, where people don't believe it or completely have washed it away. And it's anybody out there that's listening to this or that does this work that are the most important people to pay attention to, and to always, I think anybody who does this work, you need to have friends. Like I have Dylan, I have all these people that I can rely on that will always keep me straight. We all have to keep each other straight in these times. And that's what I think this show really is before dawn. There is a dawning of humanity that's birthing. I think there's multiple though. And some that are experimental that we have no idea where it's going to go. But we can't get lost in that and still stay on the understanding of where we're all being called to a natural dawning that is still happening.
Yeah, and that's the importance of human design. That's why at the beginning of the last Jupiter and Aries transit, that's when I found human design. It was like handed to me, and it was like, take this. And I was like, oh, okay. I was in Kauai. I was just like, oh, I'm at a beach, whatever. It was handed to me, and it was like, you're going to need this. And it's because in the most unexpected way, the human design is the navigation tool through this moment.
It is. It was literally downloaded, divinely downloaded.
Recently, in the 1980s,
right,
specifically to carry us through 2027, and to give us last generations of humans a way to move through a time in which, our species is going through a lot of obstacles.
Yes, and I think it's important to remember that you keep your own spiritual dharma and focus on that and not focus on anybody else's.
Right.
Because if you try to live somebody else's dharma, that's like smashing particles together too. It
is. There's no comparison. It might be your dharma to do nothing for a long time, and then at a sudden point, you know what to do. It might be your dharma to get started now and be one of those first responders to kind of creating new pathways and timelines for other humans to go on. Who knows? Only you can know, because like people that go on and on about 5D, first thing you need to know about 5D is it's a completely internally sourced vibration. You can't get 5D from the outside. You can't get it from your five senses. It's a heart-based internal guidance system. So that's also what your human design is. And this is actually, I think, for those of us like brave souls, you know, this movie can actually be enjoyed. You know,
oh yeah,
this Great Reset is probably something there's so many motivations to incarnate in a certain time, but I have a feeling that a lot of us chose it because it was actually going to be interesting. You know, it wasn't going to be just another lifetime writing books in a Victorian manner or out in the fields. Like, this was epic global transformation go time. And
yeah,
it wasn't
it feels like it was like, yeah, throw the Tower card life. I'm over the Two of Pentacles, and I'm over the Seven of Pentacles, and the Seven of Cups, and I'm over, you know, it's like, no, I'll throw the Tower and throw that with like
judgment.
Temperance and judgment, and like these huge, big
the sun, the moon,
the sun, yeah, and
the
just
star.
have it all happen and be here for the whole experience, which would be the closest feeling to God, of watching it all transform and all come into natural alignment. Even though I think that's the thing people have to get rid of, is fear of these changes, because as long, I know they're all scary, and I know that it's sometimes, I think, hard for people to gauge who's right, who's wrong, or whatever, but your internal guidance system with God, your understanding of what's divine and natural, and what these amazing godly gifts that have been throughout the ages, literally more than you can even conceive of time, is a gift that's the greatest gift that we were given, to remind us to remember and to always continue every day to awaken and do better and be brave, and to experience this as the greatest experience of all time. And I feel that this is such a powerful moment for people. And I know we have a lot of concerns out there, and I know that there's a lot of people who are in this work that are concerned about these crazy things that have tried to take all of us out. And some people have definitely got their fears because they have felt that darkness kind of creep in, or didn't know, right? But I feel like we never know what tomorrow will bring, and what the divine will bring us in the most extraordinary ways. And I hope people remember that there are extraordinary things and extraordinary people that are here to always hold the good energy, and to hold the ways, to figure out ways for us to bring the divine codes always back. And I think anybody who's maybe tripping, who watches this or listens to this episode about us talking about the recoding of humanity in such an odd way, especially anybody who questions that it's odd when they're forcing it on you, when they are coercing in such intense ways of what you can and cannot do in life, is an abuser at the highest level. And that's how the dark operates. That, you know, that there's the opposite that are out there, that are here. And just as much as they don't know what the hell that experiment's going to turn out like, we don't know exactly how we're going to figure that out. We're going to follow that divine code always, and we will win at the end of the day by following that. And that's what I recommend for you, if you're somebody out there who's freaked out about that code, or we all have family members who have that odd code going on, to remember, and hopefully that those people who have that realign back in their divine code, that I feel like that divine code will always win at the end of the day. And I feel like it's a lot of work though. And it's a lot of work for us who don't have that code, because we're all in the collective together. So whether you have it or you don't, it's a collective thing. And when over half of the population in most Western countries have it, that means, you know, it's a smaller majority of the people now who don't have it, who are holding the divine code. And that's a huge weight. And we've already had to go through the weight of being, told that we were crazy or that we can't access life itself. And it's funny, the people I know that have had the bravery and the strength to tell people and to awaken people to this for the last couple of years, we've all had each other's backs, and we've gone through this with no fear and no problems. And there was no issues. It was more of a projection of fear, and we didn't let anybody that we see as an abuser take us down or let us stop living our lives, you know? And I think it's a good message for people to remember in these times that the CERN and whatever they're trying to pull through, because I really think that's what they're doing, is wormholes and black, white hole stuff, or bringing things in from other places, is don't buy it. Don't let them abuse your natural gifts and your soul and your code, and stay on the natural divine one, and you're fine. And don't believe the hype of the fears that come to take away your power. And that's what the astrology says too. I mean, that's what it literally says, is especially coming into this rest of this year, this is a magical journey. But Jupiter in Aries retrogrades and comes back into Pisces, and it's going to be a big test for people if they're going to go blind again. And this is all happening in the fall, and they're already saying it. Like, the dark has a really good way of trying to show what they're going to do, because they can't wait, right? They have no patience. They have a patience, but they don't have the patience to, once they have it all figured out in the bag, they project it and put it out there really easy to see. But they keep talking about this fall and bringing out new style of these atrocities that they're trying to have people take. And don't buy the fears that are going to come during this fall, and even the build up to this fall. It's the greatest Oz with Jupiter coming back into Pisces with Neptune there. And it's one where Jupiter and Neptune pay you to go beyond the realms of this holographic universe and listen to the somewhat faint sound of the divine and the angels, as they say, but you can totally tap in right now and feel it through your whole essence, and listen to that, and stop listening to the other false noises that, I don't know, is very drony. And to watch our celebrities that we grew up with, there are people out there sell out right now, and it's been very difficult to watch. But it's been also at a time where I feel like anybody who's not truly aligned is easy to see right now, you know?
All the gates of Pisces are in the solar plexus.
So they're pulling on people's emotional stuff, and music and commercials, or Instagram, or
and then also, like, if there's a new edition of some kind of mandated medicine coming through in that time, it's probably going to harness the fact that these gates in the solar plexus are activated, because that's the target. If the solar plexus is deactivated, then the raves aren't viable. And the second, the first three raves come onto this planet, game over, because they are going to be the strongest embodiment of divine law that we've ever seen. You know, we are very strong and powerful as this edition of human. We have our own process to access that power. And that's what spirituality has been for us. It's been a bridging of mind and spirit so that we can use both with our will to create. There won't be a disconnect for them. There won't be a disconnect between mind and emotions and spirit. It's all one, which means that, I mean, it's really about maintaining our own integrity, you know, not just theoretical integrity in our thoughts and our words and our deeds, but the integrity of your form, the integrity of your organs, the integrity of your mind. That is what's going to carry you through to the safe zone, basically. Because I feel like if there wasn't such a time crunch, the intensity and the amount of resources being put forth by entities that are already so tired and already hate themselves so deeply, I mean, it's like between these big bursts of things, you know, distracting us, they're probably just like, like barely keeping up. because, you know, they don't make their own energy. So,
right. And I also was going to say that when those 3 raves do come, it's going to short circuit their systems.
Right. Because
natural divine electricity, energy of the earth itself, of the solar system, of our bodies is so much powerful than the grid. And it's almost getting rid of a false grid.
absolutely.
Like, so when people are thinking of Pluto coming into Aquarius, and once it leaves that 60th gate and it moves on, people don't realize it's the decoupling of a false web, like a spider's web of a false electric grid of false electric energy that is not conducive and conducting correctly on the planet.
Yeah.
That they're going to short circuit it.
Still looking forward to that.
Right. And I think that's where even the idea of putting green energy, or if you're somebody really big into the energy or climate crisis, like the second the grid is gone, the false grid.
So are all those problems.
So are all those problems. Even green energy or any of that crap, or solar problems, or any of that. It's a different energy that we're all going to experience, but it's really not different. It's the inversion of coming back to natural electricity, natural power, natural connective energy, and natural divine connection between people, between
free energy.
Yeah, and energy that we can exchange between people, and energy that we can create together that is way more powerful than a nuclear power plant or a coal plant.
Right, anything that has to like destroy something in order to create something.
Or create some sort of footprint that comes after it, right? And I don't even think that the climate's based upon that. I think it's the climate of our collective, which it's always been through magistrates, right? That have always looked at problems, whether they were in Greece and Rome, whenever there was famines or whenever there was issues, it was always a collective issue. Like, too many people are stealing right now, or too many people are doing this right now. You know, it always was the collective, and understanding what was happening in the universe and connecting. Okay, yeah, maybe if everybody stopped, you know, screaming at each other or raping each other, or, you know what I mean? Like, okay, everybody got the memo, you know what I mean? But it's like, now we don't have that. We don't have a society that's having any guidance from the divine or anything. And I hate to say it, but the religious institutions are so far gone from their original coding of the divine that they're not even doing it, and they're easily exposed by the way that they're not. I think they hold a space that is important, but again, their separation between religions, and this is definitely not a Sagittarian, Jupiterian kind of way of connecting, which is why society and people are not based upon Jupiter. It's based upon Uranus. It's based upon Aquarius. It's based upon this remembering we're all human, and remembering that human power and that human connection to the infinite divine, and that higher timeline that's really not a timeline, but a higher source of energy that created us, that's beyond belief, beyond institutionalized or even certain type of how to pray or how to be, right? It's a completely different system that people are going to have a hard time. I think that's going to be harder to let go of than electricity, is the ideas that have been instituted in our belief systems and our construct there that are completely false and completely have no fact or conviction to have evidence to even weigh against the natural order and the natural laws of the divine of life.
Yeah. And we're drastically cooling post 2027, because the whole reason that the world is heating up is because our bodies are heating up, is because the solar plexus is churning out its last machinations before it essentially implodes. You know, right now the solar plexus is like this burning hot churning machine that's doing all of this genetic processing so that we can make this evolutionary jump. Once the jump is made, it's not an implosion in the sense that it's failing. It's the kind of implosion that creates free energy, because, you know, all true energy devices are implosion devices.
Right.
And so when that happens, that heat, that friction that we've needed to push ourselves forward in this epoch ceases. And that's when as above, so below, the world will also cease to be so hot.
And it's also the end of this 5th line to the 6th line by 2027, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea...
Well, actually, we're in the first line now. We're going...
Oh, I see.
Yeah. We're rolling over to...
We're rolling...
It's kind of like
we're rolling the odometer the other way around.
Yeah.
Which, before you turn the lease car in. Back in the day, we did that. I actually did that. My dad taught me that, even with the electronic shit. Back in the day. But I was going to say that this idea of the 5 line that everybody in society, right, the heretic, but also this kind of like everybody needing to listen to this other person that has all the info to save us in life, right? That's not going to be the future anymore. Like this idea that Fauci has the answer. The president has the answer. My girlfriend has the answer, right? Like... And if I don't get the answer, then I'm screwed, instead of realizing.
I think that would be a great way to actually determine the beginning of the Aquarian age, because we're in a first line phase right now up until 2027. The first line is totally Piscean. It's like, I'll seek the answer from the demagogue or whatever. 6th line, I'm a 6th line being, says, I am the embodiment of the truth. I am it. I don't need to say it. I don't need to tell you what it is. I don't need to point to it because I'm being it. What's more Aquarian than that?
That's very true. And it's on the roof, right? So it's being able to be better at observing things without it being so much of an observation, but just like how
witnessing.
A witness that already has all the understanding of the embodiment of what it's witnessing. Mm-hmm. Like it's the way that it reminds me of being so in love with yourself and God, and when you're looking at a beautiful sunset and just that you are the embodiment within that sunset. To me, that's on the roof. Like that's the idea of being on the roof, where there's not questions, there's not fears, there's not guilt, there's not, right? Because the 5th line's guilt below that you transcend above. Those are the timelines that in the human design of transcending timelines,
right.
Really.
Because, first line is fear, 2nd line is hope, 3rd line is desire, 4th line is need, 5th line is guilt, 6th line is innocence. There is no motivation anymore.
And that's why I have goosebumps, but I thought of a sunset and that beautiful, like I just feel it all
beingness
in one, and feeling so happy within. I'm not even thinking about what's the next hour, what's the next thing. You're just so immersed in that innocent place. I think I actually have that in my chart, innocence. So I think I understand that pretty well. Is that what it says? I have innocence? I think it says that innocence is one of my thing, but innocence does something, but I forgot what that is. You're the human design guy, but
if that's your motivation,
I think it's my motivation is innocence.
That's really cool.
Which is 6th line then, right?
It is, yeah. So that goes into kind of like the substructure of your design. Can
we show the chart?
I'm going back to it, yeah.
Oh, I was talking to Bri.
Oh. Yeah, we
switched, but because people might, when they look at their human design charts, number one, you have to buy you have to pay for a program to get your full human design chart. The ones that are just the basic ones don't show so much, and all the other charts that you can run. It's just like astrology. Like I know it could be an investment for people to invest in an astrology program, but it's great with human design or even astrology programs out there where you can just pay like a monthly payment. And
Genetic Matrix.
Like, Genetic Matrix is the best.
Plugging Genetic Matrix.
I will plug them all the time.
They give so much value for a $9 a month subscription. Here
and then now you can do it.
Yeah, it's getting slow, but
that was because I was still connected.
Yeah. Get Genetic Matrix.
And you can full screen it there, and it's weird because that innocence that you talk about. It's weird. I didn't understand it till this moment, and you saying that is the 6th line, which I don't know why. I guess I focus on my own 5-1 too much.
Right, but what we're looking at here for
you can full screen it. I guess no, but you can zoom in. You're good.
Oh.
No, we're good. Brian figured it out.
So what we're looking at here, down here in this table, it's called motivation. So this is what really drives your mental process on a deeper level. This is great to know because when you get deeper into your experiment of witnessing your own mind, you can actually use these markers to see when you fall out of alignment, so to speak, or basically when you're in something called transference, which is basically when your particles are spinning the wrong way through your 3D printer. And yours up here is in the 6th tone, which makes it innocence.
Because aren't they colors, right?
Mm-hmm. Color and tone and base.
Color, tone, and base.
Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting to me is that it says, of course, the design date, right? So that's April 22nd. That's the 88 days. I created High Vibe with Uranus at 2 degrees of Taurus here in 2019. So it was like my design.
Your innate intelligence
right, brought forth what High Vibe is.
That's really cool.
That I try to help people with human design, even though I don't call myself at all human design. I just, because I'm an astrologer, I look at everything astrologically. I'm like, oh, well, that's kind of crazy. That date, that was exactly, if I was born that date, I would be at 2 degrees Taurus, and Uranus was at 2 degrees in 2019 when I created High Vibe as this version of it. And when you came in, and we even were trying with the school to do human design, and we couldn't do it. The universe tried to stop us, and we got through it, but it was crazy.
And now... yeah, I made another one. It's called DNA Alignment Academy.
I know, and it's helped so many people.
It was pretty good. I like it. It turned out
well. It was being talked about at Don't Trip 3 weeks ago.
That's
extremely.
Cool. That's cool.
But I feel like for people, I feel like you're right that I know there's some people still on the fence about human design, including me, because I got wind of it in 2010 into 2011, and I went, that's just... it can't tell the future. It can't do. I just was like, no.
Yeah.
But when I embodied it more in 2018, when I met Shaitan from Human Design for Us All, and I did an interview with him, and then he did a full report on mine, and I really took it in with Uranus on my design too. It was like crazy.
It's the Uranian system.
It is the Uranian system. But it as an astrologer, and especially if you like astrology, human design is like God, it gives you so much more about life and yourself and how we're moving into things, and looking at it through transits even at the moment, to me, is so incredible, even just on your own self, and looking at like, wow, this is activating a huge part that I already have connected in my design, right, in my body graph, or gosh, this is hitting a zone that I'm totally empty in right now. And that's probably why I'm feeling the way that feels odd or different, and understanding those understanding the gene keys, but those gates, and understanding even those channels that are created when we do have those amazing contacts, are so incredibly helpful. And it's an astrologer's paradise, I feel, being in human design. It's a paradise. It's like
a lot of my students have been astrologers. Some of your students were my students, of course.
Yeah. And I feel that that's what's beautiful about astrology's future, is looking at things like human design to take it to the next level. And we're in a time where everything needs to be looked at the future. And that's the smokescreen of these AI systems and this weird wokeness, right? That's trying to be counter to the real divine progression forward of true innovation forward that's divinely guided. That we all have to be looking forward, but that there's that weird part where you keep the traditional aspects. When we move from Pluto to Capricorn to Aquarius, it's like Pluto reveals what is sacred tradition that must always be tradition.
Timeless.
That's timeless. And then coming to Aquarius, we have to change and move into things, but we still hold the basic traditions of our human rights, right? The basic traditions that we should be able to love, and we should be able to speak freely, and we should be able, these are very basic, very timeless rights. And so I think that it gets very complicated though at this time where people feel limited, but everybody's had it in every way. And I think it's about how well you know how to get through it and not let whatever you feel is coming into your life limit you, like understanding you're accepting the limitation yourself by beating your own self up about what's outside limiting you. It's yourself inside always that's limiting you.
Yeah, it's like there's an inverted way to accept limitation, and there's like a very sovereign, liberating way to accept limitation.
Mm-hmm.
And if external limitation is accepted inwardly, it can corrupt you. But if your internal limitation, which is simply, we're limited beings, I'm limited to this physical form in a way. If I accept this limitation of my design, then I get to transcend the perceived limitations, because this carries me through that. So it's all about being very discerning about what limitations you accept. And again, it comes back to the self. It cannot be external, because your mind is always going to lead you in the wrong direction, because it doesn't have any basis. It doesn't have a core. It's just a conglomerate of everything you've ever been programmed with. So that's why it has to go back to the design. That is your limitation, but your limitation is your guardian in this age.
It's true. Well, I would love everybody to join us every Wednesday night here on my YouTube and on highvibe.tv. And if you are not a member of highvibe.tv, make sure that you are. All the links are down below to our apps. We also have a community aspect now on the website that's integrating into the app right now. But it's awesome, where you can post your own thread, connect with other high vibers. It's pretty awesome. Of course, we're all on the apps. If you want to find out more about Dylan, you're at Human Design Maven on Instagram, right?
Yep.
So that's
Human Design
Maven.
Yep.
So just Human Design and then Maven. And then, of course, I'm at the Leo Kingdom. But we'll be here every Wednesday. We'd love to always hear from you all. You can email us at any of the emails, of course, but you'll see them on highvibe.tv. And truly appreciate you, Dylan, and to be back here from after dark to before dawn. What a inversion in itself.
Pure alignment, I would say.
100%. And it's been insane to see the reaction with everybody here and how many people have showed up for this. And I know a lot of people out there have been waiting for me to come back to YouTube. I've been just waiting to roll out very, very proper and amazing other souls to do this spiritual work with. That's how serious I know you take it and how I take it. And it's not about, especially out there in this world right now, there's too much people just trying to throw the chum out there to get likes and hits.
Right.
And I will take months to years and wait until it's the right moment to put out the potent stuff. And that's what this show is going to bring. And that's what everything on High Vibe brings, especially for horoscopes and for my astrology and all that. But this is one of the shows that will be out there always for you out there in the public, and a show that will help integrate you hopefully to highvibe.tv. So looking forward to next week, and looking forward to being with you all, and especially you, Dylan, through this time we'll spend together before dawn. All right, everyone.
Thanks, guys.